according to the Pew study, 78% of Muslims reject jihad, but a whopping 22% do not. 22%, if you look at the statistics and compare it to the world's Muslim population, that would be a larger amount than all of the Axis powers combined that fought against the Allies in World War II. That is a pandemic. That's a world catastrophe, and I would not use the word random. I think it's a mistake. It has a name. It's called Islamic fundamentalism.
And welcome back to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, along with Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and the Rabbi Brad Hirschfeld. That was Rabbi Marvin Hier, on CNN, making the point that the White House will not call violence by ISIS and Al-Qaeda based on some degree of religion. Rabbi Hier pointed to a Pew study from 2013 that asked Muslims around the world whether attacks on civilians were justified. These numbers are quite interesting. Globally, 72% of Muslims said violence against civilians is never justified. And in the U.S., 81% of Muslims oppose such violence. Wow, love to meet those 19% of Muslims in the U.S. who do believe violence against civilians. Boy, they must be real peaches, huh? Anyway, about 14% of Muslims, of those surveyed outside the U.S., and 8% of Muslims in the U.S. said violence against civilians is, quote, often or, quote, sometimes justified. Good Lord. Context and clarity is everything. So let's put this in a hard number. Roughly 210 million Muslims believe violence is sometimes or often justified around the world. Wow. Obviously, President Obama doesn't believe that Pew poll.
But it is absolutely true that I reject a notion that somehow that creates a religious war. The overwhelming majority of Muslims reject that interpretation of Islam. They don't even recognize it as being Islam. And I think that for us to be successful in fighting this scourge, it's very important for us to align ourselves with the 99.9% of Muslims who are looking for the same thing we're looking for.
Slightly different number. And Cardinal Dolan from New York City wrote an op-ed in the New York Post that said, and I quote, "These aren't sporadic attacks. This is part of an orchestrated fanaticism, an ideology that sees Christianity, Judaism, and any religion of peace as the enemy." So Brad, let's start with you. ISIS capturing and beheading 21 Coptic Christians, killing Jews, and killing peaceful Muslims seems like a religious war to me.
Because it is. Here's the thing, Joe. That 99.9% is absurd. There are more than 0.1% of Muslims under arms today fighting for various fanatical causes. That does not mean, and this is really the problem we have people who understand we are at war with a strain of Islam. And the only way you can fight a war against a religious ideology is to appreciate that. That doesn't mean we have to use our religious traditions or better versions of Islam to go to war. But not to name it is to begin to lose the battle before you take the field. On the other hand, we have people who think that that percentage, and Pew's numbers are usually pretty reliable. So we're talking about a number of people equal roughly to the population of the United States, to put it in real terms. They say, oh, no, that's all of Islam. And so what you end up with is a dangerously naive position that could get a lot of us dead, or an overtly Islamophobic position, which actually will not let us engage the real problem we've got. We need to look at those numbers and admit religion is a part of this, no matter how uncomfortable that is, and it begins right with the president said. The people who do not recognize within the Muslim community that those are Muslims is because they're fighting out a religious war themselves about what qualifies as Islam. We're actually bystanders. Let's be clear, as many Christians and Jews are murdered by these forces every year, over 100,000 Muslims are killed by their own brethren every year. That's the really mind-boggling thing. I get it. I'm saying this as a rabbi, as a Jew, lived in Israel, the whole thing. You want to kill some Jews and Christians? The truth is the numbers, as horrific as they are not as mind-bogglingly terrifying. Is how does a people murder 100,000 of its own every single year? If they solve that, we'll be able to get to the Jews and Christians who are being murdered. But that's the internal fight that has to be fought, no matter how uncomfortable it is within Islam and outside of Islam.
Rick, I know this is a passionate topic for you as well.
It's a problematic topic. And the reason I wish that the White House would get around to calling it Islamic terrorism is so we can stop having conversations like this and start talking about the real issue. You say exactly, Rabbi, but you just took that time to have the same conversation that all the conservatives want to have that will do absolutely nothing to make those evil you-know-what's dead.
No, that's
Let's-
where you're wrong.
No,
That is wrong.
I
That is
am
wrong.
right.
Completely
Because
wrong.
you can't fight
And
a
I'm
war
sorry it makes you
without the
uncomfortable.
White House calling it what you want them to call it. I don't care.
Right.
We
That's
can
why
go
we have to have
kill
this
them anyhow.
conversation
No,
until there's a movement that's willing to
This
own it.
conversation is a distraction.
But
No, it's
knowledge
not.
is
Speaking of
power.
conversation, Heather, jump in.
Knowledge is power. You need to.
What we
you
know.
need to know your enemy. You need to
Right.
know.
Who
you need
doesn't
to-
know?
But
Who?
you need to talk about it.
Excuse
Rick.
me. Who doesn't know?
The leader of the
president
most
doesn't
powerful
have to.
nation
That's
in the
right, the
world
president
is
doesn't have
telling
to
the
hear it.
world that's
And
not
you
our
really
fight.
think that he doesn't know? Is that what you want to
Well,
sit
now
here
you're
and
calling
say?
the president a liar. I won't go that far.
Are you saying that the president doesn't know that he's fighting? He's not lying.
No, he doesn't know what
Why
he's
is it-
fighting.
why is
Ask,
he
wait. I
afraid?
just
He
asked
doesn't
a
know what he's
really
fighting.
simple question.
I
Yes
said
or
he
no?
doesn't know what he's fighting.
He doesn't know what he's fighting.
No.
You believe that too, Heather?
Here's a better
I
question.
believe him. I take him at
You
his
think
word.
the president's a moron?
I think he knows, but I think he should say
Thank you.
it. I think
That's a different issue.
No, but you
he
don't
knows,
want him
of
to
course.
say it.
I don't know if
care
he knows. Then he
I
has to
actually
assume he's a
I do
liar.
want him to say it. I said over and over again,
Let's-
I want him to
let's-
say it, but
let's-
only because it's a distraction.
Let's
No.
switch from understanding to perhaps, Heather, underestimating. Would that be a better word to use here with what the president is doing?
I think that's the impression he's giving. Whether or not he is truly underestimating, we had someone yesterday talking about special ops being actually on the ground. We may not know everything that he's doing, but he's giving the impression of underestimating, and that is driving.
That's true.
That is driving the misunderstanding. What I don't understand is they fight with propaganda. We do not respond. There was an article in the New York Times yesterday. I think you sent it about
Today-
the about
today's
the
paper
importance.
actually.
Right.
We are not engaging the enemy on its terms, and it's very hard to fight the war you want to fight. So whether it's underestimating or misestimating, I believe in taking the president at his word when I agree with him, which is often, and when I don't, which is almost as often.
let's do-
Right now, he is making a fatal decision for another reason. When you underestimate the force of totalitarian or fanatical Islam, you actually give rise to the people who
But
say
he's
he's
not
not telling the truth, and that's all of Islam. So ironically, with the best of intentions, the president is actually feeding Islamophobia by not
But
naming
wait,
the real problem,
let's do a
containing it,
public
and fighting
service.
it.
Let's do a public service. Let's acknowledge that the president started out with the strategy to deplete them and then destroy them, and it didn't work. Okay, we didn't deplete them. Their numbers are growing. Let's talk about that, and then let's talk about the next part, which is didn't work, Chief. Let's now find
I
a
agree.
strategy
Who's
that
the
will.
them?
The
Except
past is
that
the
we're
past.
talking
And
about
I
his
have a
wording
feeling,
and not
Rick,
that.
I have a feeling that we're going to be talking about this a lot more in the weeks and months ahead. Anyway, coming up next in the wrap, are unions beginning to lose faith in the president and Democrats? This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV.